course. Here's a 500-word story on the topic. What abuse does to your brain, told through a character's emotional journey. What abuse does to your brain. Even years after leaving, Maya still flinched when someone raised their voice, even in laughter. It didn't matter that she was safe now, living alone in a cozy apartment with soft yellow lights and the scent of lavender always in the air. Her nervous system didn't know that. Her brain, trained by years of emotional abuse, still ran on survival mode. At first, she thought it was just anxiety, the constant overthinking, the racing heart, the deep sense of unease in quiet moments. But in therapy, Maya learned the truth. Her brain had been rewired by years of being on edge. When someone you love constantly criticizes you, gaslights you, or uses silence as punishment, your brain adapts. It learns to scan for danger. It learns that love comes with fear. Maya's therapist explained how trauma impacts the amygdala, the brain's alarm system. In abusive environments, the amygdala becomes hyperactive. It overreacts, even when there's no threat. At the same time, the prefrontal cortex, the rational part that helps regulate those emotions, becomes less active. It's like driving with a foot on the gas and no brakes. That's why Maya jumped when someone called her name too quickly, or froze when her boss gave her feedback. Her brain, trying to protect her, reacted as if she were still in danger. She also struggled with memory. Not the kind where you forget where you put your keys, but the foggy kind, when entire chunks of time feel blurry, like they never fully formed. That was her brain, prioritizing survival over recall. But perhaps the hardest part was the voice inside her head, the one that still sounded like her ex. Even after he was gone, his words lived in her mind. You're too sensitive. No one else would put up with you. You're lucky I'm still here. That voice had become her own inner critic. It followed her into job interviews, relationships, and even her dreams. Healing, her therapist said, would mean more than just feeling better. It would mean retraining her brain, gently, slowly, and with a lot of compassion. Through mindfulness, journaling, and EMDR therapy, Maya began to create new neural pathways. She started catching the moments when her brain screamed danger and learned to breathe through them. She practiced telling herself a different story, one where she wasn't broken, but healing. One where her reactions weren't crazy, but understandable. Some days were harder than others, but over time, her brain started to trust her. It stopped firing alarms at every noise. The fog started to lift, and the inner voice, it began to sound more like her own, softer, kinder, and rooted in truth. Maya's story isn't just about pain, it's about resilience. Abuse leaves its fingerprints on the brain, but healing writes over them, line by line. And every day she wakes up and chooses herself, Maya rewires her mind and reclaims her life. Let me know if you'd like a final reflection or a shortened version for a voiceover. Absolutely. Here's an additional 500-word paragraph that continues Maya's story and delves deeper into how healing from abuse affects the brain and life over time. Maya's healing wasn't linear. Some weeks, she felt grounded and strong, able to handle unexpected changes or emotional conversations without shutting down. Other weeks, a song on the radio or a comment from a stranger could spiral her back into old fear responses. But even on the hard days, she noticed something was different now. She had tools. She no longer saw her reactions as weakness or overreactions. Instead, she saw them as echoes of the pain her brain had worked so hard to survive. And that shift, from judgment to understanding, was everything. Through therapy, She learned about neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to change and adapt over time. It amazed her to think that her brain, once molded by fear and criticism, could actually be rewired through consistent, compassionate effort. Simple habits like affirmations or grounding exercises weren't just self-care trends. They were brain training. Every time she chose a calm response instead of spiraling, she was strengthening her prefrontal cortex. Every time she caught her negative inner monologue and rewrote it with kindness, she was weakening the old neural loops her abuser had carved into her mind. There were other subtle signs of progress, too. Maya started to sleep better. Her jaw stopped clenching at night. She no longer needed to rehearse every conversation in her head before it happened. She found herself laughing, like really laughing, more often. That was the most surprising part. How joy, once so distant and foreign, started to feel natural again. Not forced, not a performance, just real, spontaneous lightness. It wasn't that the pain had disappeared. It was that it no longer consumed every corner of her life. In relationships, she began to notice red flags earlier. Not because she was paranoid, but because she had learned to trust her gut again. Her trauma had once dulled her instincts, convincing her that she was overreacting, overly emotional, or dramatic. But as her brain healed, her intuition returned. She could sense when someone's behavior mirrored her past abuser, and instead of shrinking into silence, she spoke up or walked away. For the first time in her life, she set boundaries not as a defense, but as a declaration of self-worth. The most powerful moment came on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. Maya was sitting in a coffee shop, writing in her journal, when she realized she hadn't thought about her ex in weeks. The memory no longer haunted her daily. His voice, once loud in her mind, had faded. It was still there, sure, but it had lost its power. That moment, small and quiet, felt like a personal revolution. She smiled to herself, sipping her coffee. Healing hadn't erased the scars, but it had helped her grow around them. Her brain, once hijacked by abuse, now responded with grace, clarity, and self-trust. And in that quiet coffee shop, Maya felt something she hadn't felt in years: free. Would you like to continue with a conclusion or adapt part of this for audio? Of course. Here's a 200-word paragraph that serves as a reflective continuation of Maya's story. As Maya continued to heal, she started helping others who were still finding their way out of the darkness. She joined an online support group and eventually started sharing bits of her journey, not the polished, perfect version, but the real, messy middle. The responses flooded in. I thought I was the only one who felt this way. Your words helped me understand myself. Maya began to see that her healing wasn't just for her, it rippled outward. She realized how common it was for survivors to carry shame for things their brains had done to protect them. Dissociation, anxiety, people-pleasing. These were all symptoms of a brain trying to survive in chaos. That truth changed the way she looked at everything. She stopped asking, "What's wrong with me?" and started asking, "What happened to me?" And then, "How can I support myself now?" That shift from self-blame to self-compassion was the true turning point. Because once Maya stopped fighting her brain and started working with it, everything began to change. Healing wasn't about becoming someone new. It was about returning to the version of herself who had been buried under fear. And she was finally starting to feel whole again. Let me know if you'd like to continue or want a voice-ready version.